Okay, so we are on lesson number 166 of workbook of A Course in Miracles. I am entrusted with the gifts of God. Oh, and it's interesting that when the human mind thinks of gifts, it thinks of like little boxes that it gets to open and, use in some way or another for itself and help feel better about itself. And it's just sort of interesting when I sit back, and it's been very quiet. It's been very quiet here in the last few days around in general. And I notice that when I sit in the quiet, it's much easier to include everything into the quiet than it is to try to extract myself from what seems to be noises that are around me, like the birds and the road and the talking of the neighbors from time to time, or the children playing, or the wind, the creaks in the house. And so in getting quiet, what I find myself doing is including them in, more like harmonizing a symphony. It all seems to be an orchestra within an orchestration. And the ability to include it all in and exclude nothing into the harmony of your own heart and mind is, I think, one of the gifts that I'm entrusted with. And the interesting thing about it is when I sit back and that begins to occur, there's another, and I'm going to use the term level, that it goes to after that occurs, that really is not of this world, but it is definitely very familiar to me in my experience of it. It's as if the more I encompass within my peace, the greater the peace that I am encompassed in a sense. And there's a joining that occurs in my heart and my mind with that greater peace that it is not of this world. And I bring the peace that I'm finding here, and all of a sudden, in a sense, you begin to realize that not only are you entrusted with God's gifts, that you are God, you are a gift of God to Himself, and we are gifts in that sense. The peace of mind that we have, the certainty, the willingness, as it says, and it's an increasing willingness. I understand that. I mean, I accept the fact that it's a process, but it's a process of, and I read it online. So a friend of mine used the word rinse and repeat. We go through the process, and then it works so well, we rinse and we repeat the process once again. And as we do this, there's greater and greater inclusions that take place in a broader and broader way of seeing that doesn't come from the body's eyes, but certainly is part of what we understand and experience within the vision, the growing, extending, including, ever inclusive, more and more inclusive and renewing vision that we begin to realize is here with us all the time, and something that we can rely on. And that's the gift. That's one of the gifts that we likewise bring. Talk about it in this lesson to those of the world who don't seem quite yet to get what's going on, and who once we were like. Although, in the back of my mind, there's a big difference. I don't think I've ever spoken of this because I don't think it ever dawned on me as it is right now. There's a big difference between a past that you carry with you based on the egoic mind's need to justify itself and sacrifice and toil. There's a difference between a past such as that and the memory of a past that's been forgiven. Because the memory of the past, in the sense that once you have forgiven your own past, forgiven yourself sufficiently, the past is no longer an obstacle. There's nothing really. It becomes an extension or the ability to experience gratitude on, and it doesn't intrude on the peace that you experience and the ability to extend that peace, because in a sense there's nothing left behind that has been undone. I know somewhere in the Bible Jesus talks about, he's asked a question about going to the temple and praying, and what he says, if basically if you find yourself in the temple and you're praying and you can't come up with the peace of mind, go out and make peace with your brother before you attempt to make peace with God, because it's one and the same peace in a sense. Yet if the past is always calling you back to it because of grievances you're holding in your mind, when I say grievances, I'm talking about even grievances that you use against yourself, based on things that you wish you would have done or thought you should have done differently, or perhaps you feel like you didn't do the best that you could possibly have been, or you offended someone. The peace that you, and one of the ways, for me, one of the ways that I have learned to deal with that comes from both A Course in Miracles and the 12-step program, where in the evening you take an inventory of the day and look at all the things that have gone on, and then with the Holy Spirit in your prayer for forgiveness, you offer forgiveness to everyone who you think has offended you, or who perhaps you've offended, because who wants the karma of any of this anymore? Nobody wants to have to repeat lessons. We'd like to learn the lesson and move along. So there's evidence for that in the Course as well, when he talks about how a teacher of God spends his day. You get up in the morning and you set your mind straight by allowing it to be organized around the laws of the kingdom, the principles that come to us, not of this world, but from the reality from which we are a part of. So I am entrusted with the gift of God, and you are God's gift. You are a gift of God, of yourself. So you do carry yourself and all the gifts that you are with you, because you've been entrusted with the kingdom, and you are the kingdom. And we've read already descriptions of the storehouse and the laying up of your treasures, where they increase to be received once again, to continue to be given away so they can continue to increase. It's an ever-increasing kingdom in that sense, and there's an ever-increasing and more inclusive of from the integration that takes place when you utilize these principles, and you begin to recognize exactly who you are, where you are, in spite of the appearances that the body's eyes still seem to present to you. They no longer cause you to mistake who you are for your reality. And this is contained in the lesson. All things are given you. All things are given you. God's trust in you is limitless. He knows his son. He gives without exception, holding nothing back, and that can contribute to your happiness. Ego likes to break that up into a lot of different things, rather than the reality of the entirety of the nature of the kingdom as being whole and perfect and available to you within the abundance, the eternal and infinite abundance from which you spring and from which springs all things that God has given you. And yet, unless your will is one with His gifts are not received. But what would make you think there is another will other than His? And in a sense, that's what I was trying to express when I was talking about the quiet and going into like this state of inclusion of everything within the quiet. The acceptance of all things exactly as they are allows you to accept God's will exactly the way they are. It is, and not have it be operating against anything that you don't think is God's will. Because what isn't God's will is non-existent and doesn't have the ability to intrude upon the holiness of His Son. The gifts of God are not acceptable to anyone who holds such strange beliefs. He must believe that to accept God's gifts, however evident they become, however urgently he may be called to claim them as his own, his being pressed to atrocity against himself. He must deny their presence, contradict the truth, and suffer to preserve the world he made. Why? Because it's a world that's in opposition to God's will in every way. And if God's will for you is perfect happiness, then the world's will for you is the imperfection of suffering. Here's the only home he thinks he knows. Here is the only safety he believes he can find. And so we look about where no safety can be found, and, the dictates of the ego, seek and do not find. And you can't find any here until finally you give up and you see where all your safety comes from. It's always been there and you've carried it with you, yet you've denied it by looking to the world that you made as a place of safety. And the funny part about it is you're looking to the world that you've made as a place of safety because you're not safe in the world you made, because it's not a place of safety. So you're stuck in this sort of infinitely smaller and smaller maze that's tightening around you. And this gets addressed as well. He seems a sorry figure, and this is something that I wanted to get to in this. He seems a sorry figure, weary, worn, in threadbare clothing, and with feet that bleed a little from the rocky road he walks. No one but has identified with him. For everyone who comes here has pursued the path he follows and has felt defeat and hopelessness as he is feeling them. Now, here's the question, and there's talks of this in the text as well. Yet is he really tragic when you see that he is following in the way he chose? Everyone is getting the result of their own mind, which is what salvation is when seen properly. Yet is he tragic, he's really tragic when you see that he is following the way he chose, and need but realize who walks with him and open up his treasures to be free. The power of your mind to allow you to think that you're tragic but get the result of your own thinking is the exact same power of mind that allows you to recognize that you are free and can get the result of your thinking in a way that allows for salvation to be the experience, in the recognition that this is not your home, and continued experiences of recognizing that you always have been home. And this is all available to you. The idea that one is available to you is the same as the other being available to you. It's a choice. And to allow for that space for people to get the result of their thinking, rather than rush in a sense, to try to save them from themselves, to allow the experience for them to recognize that they can save themselves from themselves and save the world by that self-same action of mind, is a great step. We were reading the course in one of the online rooms, chat rooms, and there was a line in there yesterday that talked about no one who still thinks he must give an answer to his brothers, who is not capable of not answering, is still locked into the ego. The idea that I don't know the answer, but we could find it together. The idea that I don't know, I really don't know. I need to defer to a power greater than myself, who has a broader perspective of the totality of what's occurring, in order to find an answer that is not out of alignment with his will, nor is out of alignment with the will of all of my brothers here, so as not to be prohibitive and offering them things that cannot lead to salvation, simply because I'm uncomfortable and think I need to know everything in order to, be who I am and get the recognition and the validation that I think is going to help me in my sojourn here, or leave me from the suffering that I'm inflicting upon myself. The ego always speaks first in that sense, and you step back for a moment. Step back and you become a gift of God and see, okay, what is it I can offer here? Not from me personally, but what is it that can be given here? And maybe the answer is in the silence and the extension of your own peace of mind and the recognition of the truth of who your brother is, rather than just offering him another answer within the world of space and time that just that validates the problem that they're having and is verification of the fact that he's needy and you're not. I'm not sure this has anything to do with today's lesson, as a matter of fact. You should read this for yourself. If you can't identify with the conditions, this is your chosen self, the one you made as replacement for reality. This is the self you savagely defend against all reason, every evidence and all the witnesses which prove to you that this is not you. When you can begin to accept and identify with your own denial, you can begin the recognition and restoration of the power of your own mind to your ability to use it to come to know God's will and to do God's will, and all joy comes from the doing of God's will. And if God withholds nothing, then you learn to withhold nothing either. We were created for giving, not forgetting. And yet in the condition of consciousness we find ourselves in, that is what's been forgotten. So we can begin to remember by participating in the forgiving, the forgiveness aspect of it, which here parallels creation. You cower fearfully lest you should feel Christ's touch upon your shoulder and perceive his gentle hand directing you to look upon your gifts. How could you then proclaim your poverty in exile? Oops. And we're all afraid. The truth is, it's just an embarrassing moment for a second when you realize how wrong you've been about everything, and the willingness to give up being wrong about everything because you're giving up your ideas that prevented you from knowing that you were in denial. You recognize you've been in denial. You recognize what you've done to yourself. That's how your will is restored to you, and that's how you can learn to utilize your will in not resisting the acceptance of God's will and the gifts, in the learning how to give them. And this goes on. It's a great lesson to read. I just don't even. Now we live, for now we cannot die. The wish for death is answered. And the sight that looked upon it now has been replaced by vision, which perceives that you are not what you pretend to be. So the salvation comes in the admission that you've been pretending to be something, so that you can put that aside once and for all, and now begin to utilize your heart and your mind in a new way, your thinking in a new way. We must discover the power of our mind as we used it in denial in order to be turned around so as to use it in a different way. Let that be so. I know in your own mind you could think, oh, I would never do that, I would never do that, but that is what denial is. Except, once and for all, that when he talks about these things, yes, this has been me. Because he gives you the ability to know who you are by using the same power that you denied who you are in a turning around, in a reversal of the temporal order, and an experience of being righted. Not righteous, but being righted, and being able to use your right mind rightly. So yes, I've been entrusted with the gifts of God. And this shows us how we're designed to give. We're designed to give. We're here for giving. We're not here for getting. The ego is a getting mechanism. We are learning to be here in a condition of forgiving. It's a journey from the forgetting of our reality to the forgiveness of ourselves and the extension of that reality.